Fast cars. Loud engines. Rock and roll energy. For years, Counting Cars wasn't just another reality show, it was a full-throttle ride into the heart of custom car culture. At the center was Danny, the Count Koker, living the dream: cars, bikes, music, and a team that felt more like family than co-workers. But behind the revving engines and high fives, a darker story was unfolding, one the cameras never showed. Fans began to notice something strange: familiar faces suddenly gone. No goodbye. No explanation. Just erased. Some left quietly. Others were forced out. And a few? They vanished under a cloud of scandal, betrayal, and bitter rumors that refused to die. Now, years later, Danny Koker is finally breaking his silence, and what he reveals about the 5 worst employees to ever walk through the Count's Customs doors will change how you see the show forever. The rise of Danny Koker and Counting Cars wasn't just a story of fame, it was a story of obsession, passion, and high-stakes loyalty. In most businesses, tension comes and goes. But in a world built on roaring engines, flawless custom builds, and a tight-knit crew, even the smallest crack can send the whole empire crashing down. And Danny Koker knows that better than anyone. Count's Customs isn't just a shop, it's the beating heart of his life's dream. Long before reality TV came calling, before the cameras and the fame, Danny was just a gearhead kid with grease on his hands and fire in his soul. Born in Cleveland and raised in Detroit, the city that gave birth to American muscle, Koker grew up where steel met spirit. His passion for restoration, reinvention, and rebellion was forged on those gritty streets. And that same energy would one day fuel one of cable's most iconic automotive shows. But dreams that burn that bright? They come with a cost. Detroit wasn't just where Danny Koker grew up, it was the fuel that powered his soul. While most kids were busy riding bikes or playing ball, Danny was already elbow-deep in engines. His father, Danny Koker Sr., wasn't just a gospel musician who toured with legendary acts like the Cathedral Quartet and the Rex Humbard Family Singers, he was also a die-hard car lover. And when he wasn't performing, he was in the garage, wrench in hand, passing down more than just skills to his son. That garage became Danny's first classroom, and by his teenage years, he wasn't just fixing cars, he was resurrecting them, giving each one a second life and a story of its own. But Danny Koker's journey didn't end with horsepower. In the early 90s, he redefined local late-night TV in Las Vegas as Count Cool Rider, a leather-clad, bandana-wearing horror host who introduced B-movies with rock-and-roll swagger and a wink of campy charm. It was weird. It was wild. And it gave Danny something priceless: on-camera experience and a cult following. So when Count's Customs was finally born, it wasn't just another garage. It was the merging of two worlds, bold custom rides and bold personality. And while others built cars for clients, Danny built a legacy on wheels. This is actually why Danny started the garage: it was useful. It was important for him to not have to wait in line to work on his own rides. At first, it was just a small custom shop tucked away in an industrial part of Las Vegas. But over time, it grew into something huge. Dai's style of restoring old things in a rebellious way caught people's attention right away. He and his team took ordinary cars and turned them into works of art. Soon, word got around about Count's habits. After the break, everything changed. Pawn Stars took over the History Channel in the late 2000s. The show took place in Las Vegas and followed the Harrison family as they ran a gold and silver pawn shop. Danny Koker was often brought in to give advice on cars and motorcycles. People saw right away that he had edge, was funny, and could be trusted. Fans wanted more every time he walked into the shop. The producers also saw it. And in 2012, Counting Cars started as a separate show. It was all about Danny Count's Customs and the crazy builds that came and went from his yard. It wasn't just about fixing up old cars on the show. It was about staying true to your goals and the people who work on the machines. In each episode, a different project was shown: such as a Harley-Davidson that was given new flames and metal or a beat-up Mustang that was turned into a showpiece. But Danny, who was enthusiastic and always trying to make things better, was at the center of it all. People quickly felt connected to the show. Counting Cars was one of the most popular shows on the History Channel by the end of its third season. More than just drama and special jobs made it a hit. It was in how real it was. It wasn't planned chaos or fake anxiety. There were real rules, builds, and stakes in this game. In fact, Danny Koker didn't slow down. His personal car collection grew to more than 100 cars when he wasn't working on the show. He repaired each one with the same meticulous care he used in his shop. He started many businesses that had the rock and roll style that made him famous. He opened Count's Vamped Rock Bar, which became a popular place for people who like live music and old cars. He started Count's Tattoo Company to get into the body art scene in Las Vegas. He even led a band called Count 77, which showed how much he loved music and how good he was at being on stage. But with so much success came a lot of stress, especially since Count's Customs had higher standards than ever before. The group Danny put together had to handle projects worth millions of dollars, people from all over the world, and short deadlines. There was more at stake than just getting a car done on time. They were meant to protect the company, which wasn't easy for everyone. As time went on, Counting Cars became known for more than just special builds. It was also known for abrupt employee departures, nasty fights, and a constant stream of workers who couldn't meet Danny's standards. The fans knew about this because some of the workers were fired and others just left without a word. What are some names that Danny Koker has carefully stayed away from over the years? Who are the workers who didn't make the cut? Stress and drama behind the scenes. For people watching at home, Counting Cars always seemed like the right mix of heart and speed. There were old rides, custom rebuilds, and a close-knit group of people who looked like they were just friends doing what they loved. But if you pulled back the curtain, you'd see that behind the scenes, things were very different. There was stress, which made it hard to be creative, and people's attitudes didn't always get along. It got harder to keep everything going smoothly as the show got bigger. It's too bad that not everyone was made for it. The truth of production was one of the things that made Counting Cars so tense. There were projects that went on for a long time, even though each episode of the show was only 30 minutes long. Every build had to meet Danny Koker's strict requirements. These were real cars with real problems. That took months of hard work, taking frames apart, custom welding, reupholstering interiors, looking for hard-to-find parts, and painting everything to perfection. Not like some reality shows that lie to get viewers, Counting Cars made it a point to be honest about the work. They used that code, and what you saw on the screen was a sped-up form of reality, not a made-up story. There was nothing wrong with the builds. The fixes were real, and there was too much pressure to finish them. Still, TV isn't just about cats working hard to change, it's also about tension, and the people who made Counting Cars knew that. The work in the garage was real, but the way it was edited turned small differences into big fights all the time. Conversations were cut together. There were a lot of deadlines. It looked like last-minute scrambles were done during long days. Over time, that kind of light started to make cracks. Danny was in charge of things in Count's Customs. He was crazy about quality. His name, his image, and often a six-figure price tag were on every car that left his shop. That meant there were no shortcuts, no half-measures, and no time to be lazy. If an employee wasn't as dedicated as he was, they were either told to step up or were fired. When things get that tough, it can make or break a team. And the stress grew as the show did. Fame made things worse. What began as a family-run business became a worldwide name all of a sudden. There were millions of people watching. At the garage, tourists began to show up. People wanted to sign things. Customers asked for impossible deadlines. Along with the workers. Some people were humble about all the attention, but others just couldn't. At times, the tension in the shop had nothing to do with the cars and everything to do with people's egos and grudges. Some workers felt like TV stars, while others didn't like the ones who got all the attention. The same guys who used to joke around while getting their oil changed were now being mic'd up, watched, and sometimes lied about on national TV. People change in those kinds of places, and some on the team didn't change for the better. Behind the scenes, Count's Customs also had to deal with law and money problems that came up as the show went on. When you're working under a lot of pressure to fix up expensive cars for rich clients on short notice, mistakes could cost you a lot of money. And for Count's Customs, there were disagreements about estimates, shipping delays, and changes. And some of that went to court. Some of these problems were made public, which hurt Danny Koker and his business's image. Most of the problems were quietly solved, though. For Danny, this was too much to handle. It was a warning that getting ahead could come with legal consequences. Though the show was at its best, the strain had grown stronger by the end. Some workers started not showing up for work. Others made bad choices with their money, and one of them ended up in court with Danny Koker. Joseph Frontier's case of theft. There are always some quiet workers in every company. They stay in the background, don't make a lot of noise, and don't get caught on camera very often. The ones you least expect, though, are sometimes the ones who do the most damage. To keep track of cars. He or she was named Joseph Frontier. Most people who watched probably didn't even remember his face, but Frontier wasn't just another team member. He wasn't painting flames or welding frames. He was dealing with money, which was a lot more important. Frontier was chosen to keep the books for the company and handle payroll, keep track of expenses, and make sure Count's Customs kept its money in order. His job was very important in a business that focused on high-end custom builds and costs of several $1,000s. On the other hand, that quiet accountant became the heart of a very loud scandal in 2016. Court papers showed that Count's Customs, Danny Koker's shop, had sued Joseph Frontier, saying that he had stolen more than $75,000 from the business. It wasn't just a matter of rounding mistakes or small overspending either. The claims were clear, precise, and serious. Frontier is accused of using company money for personal costs, such as a large down payment on a Range Rover and several plane tickets for personal travel, according to the case. What was even worse about the claims was that he not only took money, but he also tried to hide it. He was sued for forging Danny's signature on several papers and lying about financial records in a way that made the theft harder to spot. This was a huge blow to a company that really cared about trust, loyalty, and working-class ideals. For Count, his shop was more than just a shed. It was a family. That's how Danny and his group saw it, at least. It was not only unprofessional for someone in a place of responsibility to betray that trust in such a clear way, it was also hurtful. Danny didn't just blame the bookkeeper, though. Randstad USA, the staffing agency that hired Frontier, was also named in the case. It was said that the agency had not properly screened Frontier or told the company about problems in his past jobs. In essence, Count's Customs said Randstad sent them a time bomb that was set to go off and then ignored it. The case got a lot of attention, especially from people who watched the show. People were shocked. Even though there was always some tension in the Counting Cars team and the odd personality clash, no one was ready for an embezzlement scandal to happen. The action was already very intense, so it didn't need to be cut down. Still, if you pay close attention to the show, Frontier's exit was met with almost eerie silence. There was no fight caught on tape, no explanation from Danny, and no last goodbye. He just vanished from the show without a trace. The builds went on and the show went on. The audience had to put the pieces together based on court documents and news stories. What made things even stranger was how well Frontier disappeared from view. Joseph Frontier disappeared from public view, while other former cast members have been seen on social media or in talks. It was like he had erased himself after the case became public. That was either done on purpose or just a mirror of the legal mess he was in. No one knows for sure. As for the law case itself, public records show that the disagreement went to court in the end, but many of the final details are still secret or not clear to the public. The matter was taken seriously by Count's Customs, but Danny Koker never spoke out about it in public, and that says volumes. That Danny didn't say anything about Frontier could have been his way of setting a limit for himself. He has a big personality and loves telling stories. Maybe he didn't want to make the issue bigger. For someone who is so loyal, the deception might have been too painful to talk about. One thing is for sure, though. The things Joseph Frontier did changed Count's traditions for good. It wasn't just the money that was stolen. It was about trust being broken. It's hard for Danny Koker to get over a wound like that because he built his brand on respect, love, and quality work. Frontier wasn't the only exit that made people look twice, though. His story was the most legally dangerous, but other people who left the shop had less clear situations. There were people who didn't get along with Danny and people who couldn't handle the new fame. Fans loved the man's rough voice and no-nonsense attitude, so his leaving may have been one of the most shocking events on the show. He was one of the original crew members and seemed to live and breathe garage life. But something changed along the way, and when he left, there were just as many questions as there were silences. The sudden exit of Scott Jones. Scott Jones was in charge of keeping things in order in the early seasons of Counting Cars. Danny Koker was the shop's soul, and the rest of the staff worked on fixing things and painting. Scott, on the other hand, kept track of budgets, made sure people met deadlines, and sometimes said no. Scott was the police officer in a garage full of artists. During the first 2 seasons of Counting Cars, Scott worked as the shop manager and bookkeeper. He didn't have a friendly personality or a flashy style that made people like him. He was direct and focused on the numbers. It was clear that he cared more about protecting the bottom line than making the crowd laugh. He caused a lot of disagreement. But he had to be there at least at first because custom cars could cost tens of thousands of dollars to make and there were always tight timelines. Scott's part was very tense because he often had disagreements with Danny on air. Danny often made choices based on her feelings, like okaying expensive parts or letting go of last-minute redesigns. Scott was always bringing him back to reality. People saw it over and over. Scott would say that a project was going over price or behind schedule, and Danny would push back, sometimes very hard. It was really rough, and getting along with other people on set wasn't always easy. Scott then left without much of a say. He was never seen on the show again after season 2. There was no send-off, no official statement on camera, and no emotional farewell. There was only silence. Like everyone thought they would, fans started to ask questions and stories began to spread. Some rumors said that Scott might have been found misusing money or even stealing from the business. Not like the case with Joseph Frontier, though, no charges were ever brought. No lawsuit, police report, or formal accusation has been made against Scott that connects him to any kind of crime. In terms of the law, his exit was clear. Scott went to Tennessee to be closer to his family, which was the only reason given. Good for him, that's exactly where he ended up. Today, Scott Jones runs Koker's Extreme Automotive in Rand Mountain, Tennessee. It is a high-performance shop that focuses on restoration, repair, and custom builds. He even showed up again on Netflix's Swap Shop, a reality show about treasure hunts and collectors in small towns across America. Even though there have been rumors, Scott has never talked about his time on Counting Cars in public, and Danny has also not said anything about the real reason Scott left. No one knows if the tension behind the scenes just got too much or if there were greater disagreements about money. After 2 tough seasons, it was clear that both men were ready to go their separate ways, and neither looked back. But if Scott's exit seemed sudden, the next one was even stranger. The next name wasn't a boss or a moneyman like Scott's was. A lot of people liked him because of his accent, his jokes, and his never-ending energy. He didn't show up again after that. Rolly Saboe. You may remember Rolly Sabo if you watched even a few shows of Counting Cars. They were known as Rock and Raleigh. He was more than just the shop's detailer, he was also funny. In every scene, Raleigh stuck out because of his thick Hungarian accent, big personality, and contagious laugh. Raleigh was the kind of person who made the garage feel like a party, whether he was cleaning the inside of cars, polishing the chrome, or telling jokes with Kevin and Danny. But there was real ability behind the jokes. Raleigh was in charge of making sure that every finished car looked great before it was given back to the client or put in front of the camera. He always made sure that smudges, fingerprints, and dust were cleaned up. He worked hard at his job, and Danny often told him how great it was. People loved him, and each season made him more well-known. But that's what made his absence even stranger. With regular roles from season 2 to season 6, Raleigh was often seen. After that, he was gone. There was no reason given, goodbye scene, or word from the rest of the group. As always, the silence made the stories spread. Some people said Raleigh got into a fight with other employees. Others said in whispers that he was fired because he got in the way of work too often or was late too often. In 2017, it was said that Raleigh's trailer with tools and equipment worth thousands of dollars for detailing had been stolen. This led to the scariest idea. According to news sites in Las Vegas, the theft did happen. Raleigh quickly talked about what happened on social media, clearly angry and upset, but that was the last time anyone heard from her. It's interesting that there was no judicial drama afterward. There were no charges brought against Raleigh, and Danny or the team did not sue or make public complaints about her. It looks like if there was a fight, it happened inside the group and stayed that way. Some people think Raleigh quit after the theft because he was sick of the grind and ready to start his own thing. In fact, that's what he did. Raleigh Sabo opened his own company called Rock and Raleigh Custom Detailing, which is a mobile detailing service in Las Vegas. His TV show may be over, but he still fixes cars, and everyone says he's good at it. People stick with his business, and his reputation for doing great work hasn't changed. Like a lot of other people who quit counting cars, Raleigh hasn't said what made him leave. But next is a name that made show fans very worried when they left. Ariel Eichow. When it came to the people on counting cars, Shannon Eichow may have been the most underestimated. He stayed cool, paid attention, and was very skilled. He wasn't the loudest person in the shop, but he was the best at building custom motorcycles. Shannon was the lead bike builder for Counts Customs and helped make some of the most memorable bike changes on the show. His work was flawless. Shannon was always there in the earlier seasons. Shannon always came through for Danny when she needed something bold, complicated, or completely out of the ordinary. It wasn't just that his builds were technically amazing. They had a character. Shannon's work was always a unique mix of skill and talent, whether it was a vintage-style chopper or a sleek, modern beast made for speed. But around season 7, fans began to notice something was off. Shannon wasn't coming around as much. He wasn't in the group pictures. He wasn't telling us about new builds. His parts, which used to be regular, had been cut down to cameos or brief glimpses in the background. He finally faded out of the public eye, just like that. But what did really happen? Well, Shannon's disappearance didn't cause any public trouble like other cast members did, who were involved in scandals or cases. There were no lawsuits, fights, or news tales. In fact, the most common story about his leaving was that he had quietly changed his mind in a way that didn't fit with counting cars anymore. Some people who work on the show have thought that Shannon just didn't fit in with the way it started to go in later seasons. As Counting Motors leaned extra into high-drama edits, custom warm rods, and celebrity builds, Shannon's international of quiet, specific motorbike craftsmanship may have felt sidelined. A few other rumors have counseled creative differences. Shannon can also have desired extra freedom in how his builds have been provided. Even as manufacturers centered on growing tea-friendly narratives, regardless of the motive, he failed to make a fuss. He simply stepped away from the cameras. But stepping far away from the display failed to imply stepping away from the work. Shannon Eichow remains active in the Las Vegas custom scene, nevertheless constructing motorcycles, nonetheless perfecting his craft. He's every so often noticed at motorbike occasions and change suggests, and his call nonetheless incorporates admire within the custom network. He would not court exposure, and he's by no means bashed the show or the shop. And that silence in a manner speaks volumes. For fanatics who favorite Shannon's constant presence and masterful builds, his quiet go-out changed into disappointing. But unlike others who left below clouds of drama, Shannon's legacy remains easy, respected, and intact. And now from the maximum low-key member of the store, we turn to the exact opposite. A guy whose personality was as formidable as his paint jobs and who became one of the most recognizable faces of counting cars. Mike Henry. If counting automobiles had a rock megastar, it changed into Mike Henry. With his trademark horned helmet, neon-colored mohawks, and high-energy vibe, Mike introduced something wild to the garage that nobody else may want to replicate. But he wasn't simply there for laughs. Because the show's lead airbrush artist, Mike had an extraordinary aggregate of outrageous creativity and real technical ability. From fire-breathing skulls to surreal sci-fi landscapes, Mike's paintwork became cars, bikes, and even helmets into transferring portions of artwork. Fans loved him for his fashion, his humorousness, and his proper ardor for pushing the bounds of custom design. However, that passion regularly came with friction. At the same time as Danny Koker valued Mike's skills, there were a range of moments, both on Digicam and behind the scenes, in which their visions clashed. Mike favored to test, ruin rules, and make ambitious statements. Danny, then again, while open to creativity, still needed to protect the logo, meet time limits, and make sure the customers have been happy. And regrettably, that anxiety from time to time bubbled over. There had been also reports of Mike suffering with the show's manufacturing needs. In interviews and social media feedback, Mike has hinted at the strain of running below tight schedules, which entails trying to finish problematic designs whilst also filming scenes and accommodating producers' requests. He's by no means been openly adversarial approximately, but you can study among the strains. The pressure to be each a complete-time artist and a fact TV character took its toll. Through the years, Mike's display screen time started to decrease. He nonetheless popped up in episodes, however no longer as frequently as he did within the display's early days. Some fanatics speculated that he had been pushed out. Others believed he had selected to reduce. Mike finally shifted his recognition in the direction of his personal brand, Horny Mike Designs. Based in Las Vegas, the business has grown into a complete blown operation, supplying custom airbrushed gear, motorbike helmets, and specific creations that appear like they belong in a gallery greater than a garage. Mike is likewise relatively energetic on social media, in which he stocks builds, jokes, and at the back of the scenes glimpses into his global. In contrast to a few former castmates, Mike never completely cut ties with Remember's Customs. And even though he can also have often clashed with Danny Koker, Mike stays one of the maximum unforgettable personalities to ever roll through the Relice Custom storage. Within the global of fact television, characters come and cross all the time. However, Counting Motors wasn't constructed on fake drama or revolving door casting. It changed into constructed on loyalty, ability, and a shared love of machines. That is what made those exit scents exceptional. Each of the employees Danny Koker parted approaches with, whether it become due to betrayal, burnout, or a simple shift in direction, left a mark on the shop and the target audience. Some fell into scandal. Others just faded quietly. However, all of them remind us of one issue, and it is the reality that in the back of the roar of the engines and the gleam of the chrome, Count's Customs become always extra than just a television set. It was a real storage with real humans, and whilst matters fell aside, they did so for real motives. Who is your preferred solid member on Counting Motors? Inform us within the remarks segment under. If you enjoyed this video, recall to click on the following video for your display screen.